and Joanne Domenico with a term ending June 30th, 2022 to serve on the Community Relations Board.
Tom?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that carries 6-0. Thank you. We look forward to what you all can do. Thank you so much for your support. This brings us to item 6, which is discuss and consider approving a waiver to utilize the City Administration Center in accordance with Ordinance 1059-2019. Sean?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. In April of this year, Council approved Ordinance Number 1059-219, giving the Council or the City Administrator the authority to grant a waiver for the consumption of alcohol, liquor, or beer on city-owned property, provided advance notice of the event was given to the City and that it would be served by a duly certified caterer. Mr. J.R. Sartain of FOE Enterprises, LLC, recently purchased 81 Speedway and would like to host an informational social here at City Administration Center to promote the racetrack as well as promoting the city, and then unveil their renovation plans and their new logo for the racetrack. Their plans are to invite key members of the community, the council, local area racers and sponsors, and would like to be able to serve hors d'oeuvres and beer during that event. The event is tentatively scheduled for 6:30 to 8:30 on December 18th. Staff would recommend approval of the waiver.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions?
I was going to say, being this is consistent with what we have talked about in the past, I would make a motion that we approve the waiver following allowing the consumption of alcohol, liquor, or beer at the City Administration Building on December the 18th, 2019.
Brandy?
I second this motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 6-0. At this time, we need to take probably about a 5-minute recess so that we can reconvene as the land bank, if somebody would like to make that motion. John?
I'll make a motion we take a recess.
Okay. And Brandy?
Second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Not seeing any discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 6-0. All right, we're going to reconvene as the City Council after our recess, and that brings us to item 9, which is discuss and consider an amendment to the 2019 Land Bank budget pursuant to KSA 12-5903B. D?
The council is required by statute, again, to review and approve the land bank budget before it can be adopted by the land bank. If you move forward with this action tonight, it will be on the December 10th agenda for adoption.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Brandy?
Make a motion to approve the amended Park City, Kansas land bank budget in the amount of $163,586.
And George?
I second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 6-0. Thank you, Dee. That brings us to item 10, which is discuss and consider approval of an ordinance creating a historian board and associated bylaws. Dana?
Thank you again, Mayor and Council. This is an item that is very near and dear to a lot of us. It is the history of Park City. And if you recall, in April, there was a long discussion regarding how are we going to capture the history of Park City and document that, particularly in light of the fact that our 40th anniversary is coming in 2020. So at that time, the Council approved creating a committee. The members of that committee were George Capps, Melvin Kerr, Tom Jones, and myself. And so we have been meeting and looking at this, and it is really just an awesome thing in front of us. We were talking and trying to determine, one of the comments was, should this be a staff person? Someone that would be hired, because in the past we've had this kind of a piece of a lot of different people that have been involved in this. So one of the first things that we did is, as a committee, is we surveyed Kansas cities to see if there was such a position in Kansas cities, and found that there really was none. There were historical societies, but there were not really any staff members that were a historian. And so then we thought we really should kind of lean on who is the expert in our community for preserving and cataloging documents, and well, that's our library. So we met with Lynn Warren, who is our library director, and then we in turn met with the library board. And they have expressed an interest to partner with the city to be able to take this amount of information that we currently have that is down in our basement, some which has been kept in different ways that people have organized it, and pull this together and move forward and try to engage our community to collect more documents. And one of the things that has already been done is that there is a scanner that has been purchased. It is in partnership with the city and with the library. And the library board has expressed the interest of establishing a place within the library where work could be done on this effort. And in addition, there would be a manner in which we could display the items for the community to come in and be able to see. So what we have determined as a committee is that we would like to recommend that this is a bigger thing than one person. We would like to engage our community, and we are suggesting as a committee that we move forward with creating an historical board. I would answer any questions that you have.
Does anybody have any questions? I know the committee worked hard. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to throw into that, but Dana did a very nice job. But Tom?
I would say we've had several meetings, and we've met with the library board, and the consensus of the team is that we look at this kind of like the group that we nominated or set up a team for to do the events, and the same thing be modeled here. And so I didn't see anybody else put any numbers up yet, so I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we move to approve ordinance 1083-2019, creating a historian board and associated bylaws.
Okay. Anybody like to second that? George?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. George, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of pumped up about this. You know, it's something we need to do because we're still a very young city. 40 years in the space of time is very short, and I think we have a history, and I think it's very important that we get that down so we don't lose it. And I know a lot of people are passing on, people that made this town, and I think we need to capture their memories and their documents and stuff while we have a chance.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. Marla, would you call the roll?
John Lanier.
Aye.
George Glover.
Aye.
Ben Saucetta. Melvin Kerr.
Aye.
Tom Jones.
Aye.
George Capps.
Aye.
Brandy Bailey.
Aye.
Jim Schrader.
Okay. And that ordinance passes 6-0. Thank you, Dana.
Thank you, council committee, and to the public who is watching. We will be excited to have you interested in becoming a member of this board. Thank you.
All right, next item is item 11, which is a sanitary sewer easement located approximately 1,200 feet south of 61st Street North and Broadway Avenue. Sean?
Yes, sir. Jake Properties, who's the owner of the subject property, together with the property owners adjacent both to the south and the west, as well as his agent Levi Bond of the Caw Valley Engineering, has requested approval of a lot split of Tract 3 of the Yazell Acre Plot. The subject property is currently zoned I-1 Light Industrial and is undeveloped. The surrounding areas to the north, west, and south are also industrial and across the street of Broadway is C2 Commercial Service Business. The area is predominantly used for trucking, warehousing, and distribution, as well as other industrial uses. The applicant states that the eastern portion, and if I could get that map up, the second slide should be the next one. The applicant states that the eastern portion of tract number 3, that right there is highlighted in red, is tract number 3. If you could go to the next slide. This makes it a little bit easier. The eastern portion of tract number 3, which is actually going to be identified as parcel number 2, will be combined with the property adjacent to the north, United Petroleum Transport, while parcel number 1 will remain part of the current A-Plus trucking business. There you go. So lot number 3 is the middle lot. The eastern portion of it is going to go with the north property, and the western portion is going to go with the southern property. The bright yellow line going down the middle is an existing sewer line, and what they're trying to do is secure a sewer easement to go from the front portion of lot number 3 to the back portion of the northern lot, the little dashed line there. On October 21st, the Planning Commission approved the lot split 5-0, subject to the conditions below, which is the final action on this request. City Council is charged with the acceptance of the dedication, such as the sanitary sewer easement. With this action, the lot split application would be completed. As far as the physical impact to the city, we would be responsible for assuming maintenance responsibilities of the small segment of the sanitary sewer main. So staff recommends approval subject to the following conditions. 1, that the applicant shall submit a covenant tying parcel 1 of tract 3 with tract 2. And then number 2, a utility easement shall be submitted to the city to facilitate the extension of the sanitary sewer to serve the eastern portion of parcel 2 of tract 3.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Sean? Okay. Is there a recommendation from the council? Tom?
I waited. Just on item 11, except that, I'll move to accept the dedicated sanitary sewer easement as a requirement for lot split on tract 3, Yazoo Acres, located approximately 1,200 feet south of 61st Street North on Broadway, subject to applicant submitting covenant tying parcel 1 of tract 3 with tract 2 of Yazoo Acres, and submitting the utility easement to the city to facilitate the extension of sanitary sewer to serve the eastern portion of parcel 2 and tract 3.
Okay, Brandy?
I second his motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 6-0. That brings us to item 12, which is discuss and consider amendment to municipal code related to prohibiting pedestrians soliciting rides, business, or contributions. Doug?
Mayor and council, there was a discussion of the existing ordinance that regulated persons who stood along the highway to solicit rides or business or contributions at last meeting. And what you have in front of you is an ordinance amending the existing section, and I believe it incorporates the comments and the concerns that the council had from that last meeting. Specifically, what has been deleted or amended out of the existing ordinance is the extension of the 10-foot area, which was a sort of a free zone, which we allowed people to stand back from the highway. That really didn't make a lot of sense, and it wasn't something that was easily enforceable. And so that has been deleted. That's consistent with the standard traffic ordinance, which just prohibits a person standing upon or along a street or a highway, as the ordinance now reads. In addition, there was a provision inserted in subsection C, which regulates people who may not be actively soliciting contributions, standing along the highway, but as they stand there, they do from time to time move over towards vehicles to collect people who decide they want to give them something out of the goodness of their heart or want to talk to them. And if that impedes traffic, that is now a violation. And then finally, the standard traffic ordinance does have a provision in it that allows a permit for solicitation along a highway for contributions to be granted by the governing body. That has been deleted from the standard traffic ordinance in this ordinance, and so there is no provision, if you adopt this, for the granting by the city council of any sort of permit for organizations to stand along the highway to solicit and collect contributions.
Thank you, Doug. Does anybody have any questions for Doug? Is there a recommendation from the council? John?
I'll move to approve ordinance number 1084-2019, amending section 14-108 of the municipal code relating to prohibiting pedestrians soliciting rides, business, or contribution from the occupants of vehicles.
Okay. And Brandy?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. Marla, would you call the roll?
John Lanier.
Aye.
George Glover.
Nay.
Ben Salcetta. Melvin Kerr.
Aye.
Tom Jones.
Aye.
George Capps.
Aye.
Randy Bailey.
Aye.
Jim Schrader.
All right, and that ordinance passes 5-1. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate that. The next item on the agenda is item 13, which is an executive session for discussion relating to the acquisition of real property. Sean, I know we kind of threw out some numbers. How much time do you think we need on this? 20 minutes? Doug, do you have anything to add?
Yes, the action by the council should be to recess into executive session for a period of 20 minutes to discuss the potential acquisition of real property by the city with the city administrator, the assistant administrator, the city attorney, and the governing body in the executive session.
Okay, thank you. Brandy?
Make a motion to recess into executive session for 20 minutes.
Melvin?
I'll second that.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes 6-0, and it is 7:32. Brandy, I'll let you keep the time. Okay, we're going to reconvene from our executive session where no binding action was taken. And we'll move on to item 14, which is discuss and consider a charter ordinance exempting the city of Park City, Kansas relating to public improvements for the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying for improvements. Garth?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Garth Herman with Gilmore & Bell of the city's bond council. Appreciate you having me out here tonight. I'm going to kind of go through this charter ordinance and explain what it does. But just kind of briefly, I know many of you probably understand what home rule is and what charter ordinances are. But just in case there's anybody out there who may not, I'll just briefly talk about, basically what a charter ordinance is or kind of what home rule is. Basically, under Article 12, Section 5 of the Kansas Constitution, it authorizes cities to determine your own local affairs and basically set your own rules so long as they don't conflict with state laws. The two main ways a city can do this is by passing either a home rule ordinance, ordinary home rule ordinance, or a charter home rule ordinance. Ordinary home rule basically is where a state law doesn't say that you cannot do something. So in essence, the city can use its home rule power to kind of fill that gap. That's just by a simple ordinance adopted by majority of the city council. In order to use your charter home rule power, basically what that means is that there is a state law that does apply to the city, and it says that you have to do something in a certain way. However, if that state law does not apply to all cities equally throughout the state, then it can be subject to charter. And basically, that process is where the city passes a charter ordinance. It's passed by a 2/3 vote of the governing body. And in essence, if it goes through a 60-day protest period without having a sufficient protest filed against it, then basically whatever that charter ordinance says and amends that state law for, that becomes the new rule for that city until the charter ordinance is repealed. So in essence, it's a mechanism where the city can, in essence, set its own rules. So the state law will say, if you want to do X, you have to do it a certain way. And a city, by going through the charter ordinance procedure, can actually change that procedure and set its own rules as long as it still kind of stays within some of the framework of that state law. So what this specific charter ordinance that you have in front of you tonight, basically what it does is there is a set of statutes in KSA 14-570, 571, and 572, which apply to cities of the second class. And what they say is that if a city of the second class has a capital improvements plan that will take multiple years in order to implement that plan, a city can authorize the issuance of GO bonds to finance all or any portion of that CIP, and any of those bonds that are issued do not count against the city's debt limit. However, before those bonds can be authorized, they have to be approved at an election. That's what the state law says. However, as we just talked about, that state law only applies to cities of the second class, so therefore it does not apply to all cities equally. There's 3 classes of cities, first, second, and third, so basically by its terms, it only applies to one of those classes. So in essence, the city can pass a charter ordinance to change that state law, which does apply to the city of Park City. You can change that in order to make different rules for the city with regards to that CIP program. That's what this charter ordinance does tonight. So basically, if this is passed by a 2/3 vote, it'll be published once a week for 2 consecutive weeks. On that second publication, it starts a 60-day protest period. Once that 60-day protest period runs, this charter will become the law for the city of Park City. What this charter would do is it would allow the city, once it implements a multi-year CIP, capital improvements plan, it would authorize the city to, in essence, be able to authorize the issuance of bonds to finance any of those projects on that CIP simply by adopting a resolution. That's the default. Instead of requiring an election, you could authorize those bonds simply by adopting a resolution. There are some other provisions in here which allow the city, at its sole discretion, to, in essence, determine which way it wants to authorize those projects. So like I said, the default would be by passing a resolution to authorize the bonds for those projects. Depending on the projects, on a case-by-case basis, the city council may say, well, this is a much bigger project, and we would like to get some public input. So maybe before, instead of just doing a simple resolution, maybe we publish that resolution to provide public notice. Or maybe we say, we'll publish that resolution, but we want to put it up to a notice and protest period. Or maybe we put it up to an election to get as much public input on maybe a controversial project. But basically, those are all options and alternatives set forth in this charter ordinance. But by its terms, the default would be a resolution. But on an alternative basis, case-by-case basis, you could choose going forward how to basically use the different mechanisms in this charter. This charter can apply to a wide variety of projects, basically any sort of capital improvement, including land acquisition, acquisition of equipment, constructing new buildings, making new parks. Like I said, a wide variety of public improvements, as long as they are included in your CIP, then the city could come back at a later date and decide to authorize bonds in order to finance any or all of those projects. Any of the bonds that were issued or would be issued under this charter, like I said, those would be exempt from the debt limit. So there's that 30% of the city's assessed valuation. That sets the cap for how many GO bonds you can have outstanding. There are certain exemptions, certain types of bonds don't apply against that cap. Any bonds issued under this charter would be exempt from that debt limit. So that's another thing to keep in mind as well. So with that being said, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions or provide any clarification on anything related to this charter ordinance if there are any questions.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Garth? Sean, is there anything you'd like to add? The one thing I like about this is the accountability that's left with the city and the capital improvement plan, that has to be in place. So I really like that protection that's there. Is there a recommendation from the council? Randy?
I move to approve Charter Ordinance Number C-39-2019, exempting the City of Park City, Kansas from the provisions of KSA 14-570 and KSA 14-571, and providing substitute and additional provisions of the same subject relating to public improvements and the issuance of bonds for the purpose for paying for those improvements.
Okay. Is there a second? Melvin?
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Not seeing any discussion. Marlo, would you call the roll?
John Linear,
Aye.
George Glover,
Aye.
Ben Salcetta, Melvin Kerr,
Aye.
Mayor Mann,
Aye.
Tom Jones,
Aye.
George Capps,
Aye.
Randy Bailey,
Aye.
Jim Schrader.
And that passes 7-0.
All right.
Garth, thank you very much for
No
your
problem.
patience with us tonight.
Not a problem.
Coming in later,
Thank you
we
for,
appreciate it.
Thank you for having me out tonight.
Thank you. That brings us to item 15, which is discuss and consider approving a homebuyer's incentive plan for 2020. Sean?
Yes, sir. The city has offered a homebuyer incentives plan since 2014. On an annual basis, the council has made modifications to that plan to more accurately target and incentivize the type of housing needed /and/or desired in the community. The last modifications were made in June of 2018, where council outlined subdivisions where developers were not current on taxes were no longer eligible for an incentive. Subdivisions where the developer are current on their taxes could receive up to $2,500 incentive, and it required the builder to pay $3,000 towards the landowner's closing costs. Leasing of newly constructed single-family homes were no longer offered incentives, as were duplexes. It also removed the Bear Hill Estates incentive, and then it grandfathered any building permits issued prior to June 26, 2018. Staff is proposing the homebuyer's incentive plan be continued for 2020 with the following specifications. And it's not so much on the amounts or what buildings are covered. I think those are fair and consistent with what we currently have in place. But just to make certain that there are some simple guidelines, the applicant must be a qualified homebuyer contracted with a licensed builder, realtor, and/or developer. A building permit is purchased or issued prior to December 31st of 2020. All construction performed by contractors licensed by the city. Periodic inspections are required by city code for the building permit. Construction, this is one difference from the last year. Construction must be completed within 1 year of issuance of a building permit. Last year, the way it was written is you had 6 months from once you made application in order to secure a building permit, and then after you got a building permit, you were only granted 6 months to build the building. If you're pulling a permit in November, you may not be able to complete the house in 6 months due to the weather. So to us, it shouldn't really matter as long as the house is constructed within a year time period. You have to obtain a certificate of occupancy issued by the building inspector, and then again, still require the builder and developer to provide $3,000 incentive applied to a reduction of closing costs for the home buyer, and make certain that they have a W-9 on file. As far as the fiscal impact for this, for the 2019 budget that we're currently in, council elected and put in there $87,000 for the homeowner incentive buying plan. Total spent to date is just right at $49,500. The 2020 budgeted amount for the program was $95,000, so it's well within the limits of what we anticipate. So with that, Mayor, staff recommends approval of the 2020 Homebuyer Incentive Program with the above proposed stipulations.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Sean? Is there a recommendation from the council? Tom?
I was going to say, this is something that's been working, and I support extending it. So I would make a motion or move to approve the 2020 Home Buyers Incentive Program with the following stipulations as have been presented.
Sir.
Okay, is there a second? George?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 6-0. So we'll move on to governing body reports, and we'll start with Brandy.
I wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. That's all I have.
I got a few words. I've been watching the news lately, and I've got a concern. My concern is for our law enforcement people. And, you know, so many officers won't speak up because they don't want to be self-serving. But, you know, I've thought about, I observed on the news, you know, and this year alone, we've lost 19 soldiers in Afghanistan. We've lost 38 law enforcement officers here in the United States. I can tell you that law enforcement officers suffer through post-traumatic stress too. You know, they see and deal with things that I can tell you, even working in a small town, that a human being shouldn't have to deal with or see. But when they leave their job and retire, they have no backup. Now, I've got people I know personally who are getting very good backup from the VA. You know, they served, one served in the Navy and one served in Vietnam, and I can tell you the VA has taken very good care of them. But you know, our police officers, if you want to, I don't want to get in depth, but they suffer the same trauma that soldiers do. They're an armed force. They have to fight people. But they don't have that support or backup when they leave. And going through the future, our law enforcement is under attack in this country. If you watch the news, you watch them dumping water on them in New York City. You watch them being attacked. You see the sheriff down in Alabama, I believe it was, shot just simply for telling some teenager to turn his music down. You know, they're under attack, and I don't know where to start. But something needs to be done to help them when they get out of it, like our military people. When they get out of it, they complete their service, they get out of it, they've got a place to go to take care of them. But trust me, law enforcement deals with post-traumatic stress, and you know, they're tough guys. They don't admit it, but they do. I can guarantee you they do. And you know, I just wanted to get that off my chest. I think something ought to be done to help those guys when they retire and go into their civilian life. Happy Thanksgiving.
Tom?
Wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and I don't have anything tonight.
Okay. Melvin?
Well, wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and I got a chance to go to see Elvira out there at the Oak Ridge Boys at Hartman Arena. Always put on a good show, so thank you.
George?
Yeah, I'd like to also wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. We actually have a lot to be thankful for, so when you're saying grace with your family, give God the thanks for everything He's done in your life. And also like to say about the suicide prevention, you know, as we get closer to Thanksgiving, we have a lot of folks who may be by themselves or don't have any family. Make sure you try to connect with someone if you're having problems with depression or anxiety. There are many hotlines that you can call to talk to someone, so I want to make that evident to people that are in need during this time. Thank you.
John?
I have nothing to say. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
All right.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Tom?
I'll second that.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 6-0. Thank you all. Have a great Thanksgiving.